On a family of systems largely used for playing fighting games, and rightly so, there are still other genres that need to be accounted for. Something like Puzzle Link or Biomotor Unitron might not be among the first things that come to mind when you think of the Neo Geo Pocket Color, but perhaps Metal Slug should be. One of SNK's most successful non-fighting game properties is something we haven't really talked about in this series yet. Originally released in arcades in 1996 by one Nazca Corporation, it officially became an SNK property shortly after that, and has had 7 mainline entries across lots of different platforms, a couple of remakes, these 2 handheld spin-offs as well as one for the Game Boy Advance, and even a third-person shooter and a turn-based tactics game, not to mention a bunch of mobile things down the years as well. First Mission is not simply a remake of an earlier console or arcade game, but the first Metal Slug on a handheld is its own new story. Your task was taking out the guerrilla leader of the government, one Colonel Bildergarn, and his leader at the front lines, Lieutenant Colonel McBar. You'll do this over the course of 15 missions, with the final target being to destroy the government forces' material storage facility and abduct the enemy leader. Gameplay is multifaceted, but for the most part you'll be running and gunning your way through lots of different environments, from a jungle to a city and even fortresses and underground bases later on. The main style of gameplay is interspersed with a healthy dose of vehicular combat, where you can drive tanks and fly fighter jets on some levels as well. Controls are incredibly simple, A to fire and B to jump. Now, I usually get mad when I see the words B to jump, but remember the buttons are the other way around on this console, so it still feels right. Switch between your main and secondary weapon using select, and your 8-way joystick controls both movement and where you're aiming. Gunfire, especially when in the tank, can be a little tricky to aim at first, as the direction sort of cycles around you a little bit, but after a few minutes you should get used to it, and it certainly does come in handy to be able to hit things that aren't directly in front of you. Your regular gun is infinite but doesn't auto-fire, however you can collect machine guns, shotguns, rocket launchers and grenades with limited ammo as you go. As well as this, if you get into real close quarters with an enemy, you can pull out your combat knife and just shank the guy. It happens automatically, so don't worry about juggling weapons or anything. The game is pretty good at giving you a weapon that'll be useful in the vicinity, and power-ups are fairly plentiful, so don't worry too much about stockpiling ammunition. As well as weapon pickups, you'll see lots of other items and drops from enemies. A lot of these are energy replenishments. They could be med kits that fully heal you, wrenches that fully fix your vehicle, or a variety of foodstuffs that give you a little health back. The ones dropped by fallen enemies disappear pretty quickly though, so do try to grab them. There are miscellaneous objects like clocks, cups, toilet paper and so on that are less important as they only augment your score, and even some detrimental items such as mushrooms and poison which take health away. Perhaps most importantly, look out for shields, coins, and EX magazines. The magazines increase your ammo supply for whatever weapon you're holding, coins increase the number of continues you have, and shields, rather than providing defense or anything, actually increase the military rank of your character. At the end of each level, you'll gain experience points based on how well you did, whether you rescued POWs, didn't take damage, took out plenty of enemies, that sort of thing, and if you get enough, you'll go up in rank. You start off as a recruit, RRT, and can progress through 23 different rankings, through things like corporal, sergeant, lieutenant, right up to general, general of the army, and even something called SD, which I assume means slug dude or something. You're very unlikely to see that one, on your first playthrough anyway. You get more health as you get promoted, so it's definitely worth doing, although it will more than get balanced out by the increase in difficulty. Make no mistake, this is one brutal ass game. Even at the kiddie difficulty, it can be a struggle later on. Although once you beat the game, you not only unlock the female character, but your ranking will carry over in a new game plus manner that'll let you get that top ranking. This is when you crank up that difficulty though. The variety of the game makes the levels breeze by, and there are plenty of branching paths to keep things interesting. The town and underground levels, for instance, have lots of different doorways and paths you can travel down, with no one linear route to the exit. But even cleverer than that, if you happen to get shot down during the plane missions, it's not necessarily game over. You might end up at ground level and have some extra stages you need to battle through. Weirdly, you can get more experience this way, so if you're aiming for those higher ranks, it might not be such a bad idea to jettison your plane. It makes for a better movie, I guess, anyway. During level 3, there's a secret warp that'll take you right to level 10, 2/3 of the way through the game, which yeah, it's great for progress, but you'll miss out on a bunch of XP. The boss fights really shine in Metal Slug First Mission, and while their patterns are rarely super elaborate, that doesn't mean you'll beat them right away. The first one, for instance, requires you to maneuver within a narrow gap between two helicopter machine guns firing up back at it. Although if you still have some grenades handy, this becomes much easier, just lob them from the sides. Most bosses do have a knack to beating them, but if you only have your regular handgun, you can expect to be there for a while. This is about the best music we've heard so far on this console. It's not saying much, I know, and the accompanying sound effects are really hefty with excellent gunfire and explosion noises throughout. It has been a low-ish bar, granted, but Metal Slug really goes for the high-octane backdrop you pretty much require for a game like this. What's truly mind-blowing though are the graphics. I mean, just look at that scenery if nothing else. There are stunning gradients for the sunsets, cityscapes and jungles with tons of detail, really effective scrolling, and a really vibrant, colourful palette throughout that really matches the style from the arcade machines. Enemies can even be partly hidden in this scenery in a very clever way, for instance up in the trees of the jungle stage. Everything looks really good. It's up there with the best that any of the fighting games have offered, and the levels here are much bigger. Just make sure you don't get distracted by it. On the whole, Metal Slug First Mission is a breath of fresh air. Like, I adore SNK's fighting repertoire. It's probably the peak of all 2D fighting video games from the 90s, even over Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. But you definitely do need more than that on a system, and with this game, and its sequel later on, we finally have something else to put in the big hitter bracket on the Neo Geo.